The morning sun cast long shadows across the freshly painted facade of Johnson Real Estate Solutions as Sarah Johnson adjusted her pearl necklace, a graduation gift from her grandmother who had always believed in her dreams. The golden scissors felt heavy in her hands, not just with their physical weight, but with the significance of this moment. At 34, Sarah had transformed her dining room business into a proper storefront in downtown Atlanta. The small crowd gathered for the ribbon-cutting ceremony included faces that had been part of her journey. Marcus, her first client who trusted her with finding his family home. Mrs. Thompson, who had mentored her through real estate school. And her parents, whose proud smiles could have lit up the entire street. Her father, a retired high school principal, stood tall in his best suit, while her mother clutched a bouquet of yellow roses, Sarah's favorite. "I stand here today," Sarah began her speech, her voice clear and confident, "because of every person who believed in the power of dreams." She glanced at the polished brass plaque bearing her name, remembering the nights spent studying for her real estate license while working as a barista. The journey hadn't been easy, but each challenge had shaped her into the businesswoman she was today. The red ribbon fluttered in the spring breeze as Sarah shared her vision for the future. Her company wouldn't just sell houses, it would help build communities. She had already implemented a first-time homebuyers workshop series and partnered with local financial literacy programs. The scissors sliced through the ribbon with a satisfying snip, and applause erupted from the gathered crowd. Inside the office, Sarah had created a space that reflected her professional philosophy. The walls were painted in warm earth tones, adorned with local artists' work. The conference room featured a large table she had refinished herself, symbolic of the hands-on approach she took with every client. Modern technology blended seamlessly with comfortable furnishings, creating an atmosphere that was both professional and welcoming. As guests mingled during the reception, Sarah overheard snippets of conversation that made her heart swell. "Did you see the community board she set up? I love how she's featuring local businesses." Her assistant, Taylor, expertly managed the flow of well-wishers while keeping track of the day's scheduled appointments. Sarah had insisted on keeping the office open for business even on opening day. The celebration was interrupted briefly by a call from a young couple facing foreclosure. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped into her office to take the call, demonstrating the dedication that had become her trademark. She scheduled them for a consultation the next morning, already forming a plan to help them navigate their options. As the morning wound down, Sarah stood at her desk, running her fingers along the business cards she'd just placed in their holder. Each one represented not just her contact information, but a promise to serve her community with integrity and dedication. Through the window, she could see the new sign catching the midday sun, its letters spelling out a dream realized. Little did Sarah know that this day of triumph would soon be tested in ways she never imagined. But for now, she allowed herself to savor the moment, unaware that her next drive home would set in motion events that would challenge not just her success, but her fundamental faith in justice. The late afternoon sun painted Atlanta's skyline in hues of orange and pink as Sarah pulled away from her office, her heart still soaring from the successful grand opening. The radio played softly, a jazz station her father had introduced her to years ago, while her mind wandered through the day's highlights. Her new business card sat in a leather holder on the passenger seat, a tangible reminder of her achievement. At each stoplight, Sarah couldn't help but check her phone, reading the congratulatory messages pouring in from friends and clients. A text from Mrs. Thompson particularly touched her. "You've made history today, girl. Your grandmother would be so proud." Sarah smiled, remembering how her grandmother had always told her to dress for the job you want. Today, in her tailored navy suit and her grandmother's pearls, she had done exactly that. The familiar route home felt different somehow, more meaningful. She passed the coffee shop where she'd worked during real estate school, the library where she'd spent countless hours studying for her license, and the bank that had finally approved her business loan. Each landmark was a chapter in her success story. Turning onto Maple Avenue, Sarah noticed the patrol car in her rearview mirror. She automatically checked her speed, 28 in a 30 zone, and made sure to complete a full stop at the intersection, just as her father had taught her. "Always be beyond reproach," his voice echoed in her memory. The patrol car's lights suddenly flashed to life, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. With practiced calm, she signaled and pulled over, positioning her car perfectly parallel to the curb. Her hands found their place at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, and she drew a deep breath, centering herself. The dashboard camera she'd installed last month, a business expense she'd initially questioned, blinked steadily on her windshield. The officer approached slowly, flashlight beams sweeping across her car despite the lingering daylight. Sarah watched in her side mirror, maintaining her professional composure. When he reached her window, she greeted him with the same warm smile she'd given her clients earlier that day. "License and registration," the officer requested, his tone clipped. Sarah noticed his nameplate read Officer Barrett as she reached carefully for her documents, narrating her movements just as her father had instructed. The leather folder containing her credentials also held her new business card, a detail that would later prove significant. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Officer Barrett asked, studying her license with unusual intensity. "No, sir, I don't," Sarah replied truthfully, her voice steady despite the growing tension in her shoulders. What followed was a series of questions that seemed to stray far from any traffic violation. Where was she coming from? Was this her car? Why was she in this neighborhood? Sarah answered each query with patience and precision, even as she felt the situation shifting beneath her feet like unstable ground. When Officer Barrett spotted her new business cards, his eyebrows lifted slightly. "Real estate agent?" he asked, his tone carrying an edge that made Sarah's professional smile falter for just a moment. "Must be doing well to afford this car." As the interaction continued, Sarah's mind flashed back to her morning speech about dreams and determination. Now, sitting in her car with red and blue lights painting shadows across her face, she realized that some challenges come not when you're climbing toward your dreams, but when you finally reach them. The simple traffic stop was about to become something far more complex, testing not just Sarah's composure, but her entire understanding of justice in her beloved city. Back in her home office that evening, Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she connected her dashboard camera to her laptop. The camera, a high-end model she'd purchased during her office renovations, had seemed like an extravagance at the time. Now, as the footage began to play, she thanked her business instincts for that decision. The video was crystal clear, showing every detail of her drive home. Sarah leaned closer to her screen, watching herself come to a complete stop at the intersection. 1, 2, 3 full seconds. Her real estate training had taught her the value of documentation, but she never imagined those skills would be needed in this way. She reached for her leather-bound notebook, the same one she used for client meetings, and began taking meticulous notes. Time of stop, 6:42 p.m. Weather conditions, clear. Full stop duration, 3 seconds. Her handwriting, usually flowing and confident, was extra precise as she documented every detail. The camera's timestamp matched her phone's GPS data, creating an irrefutable digital trail of her journey home. Sarah's dining room table soon transformed into a command center of sorts. Her laptop displayed the footage while her tablet showed local traffic regulations. She'd spread out her citations like pieces of a puzzle, each one telling a different story than what she'd experienced. The charge of disrespecting an officer particularly stood out, contrasting sharply with her recorded responses, which remained professional throughout the entire interaction. A text message lit up her phone. It was Marcus, her first client turned friend. "Heard what happened. My security company installed those cameras. Let me send you the technical specifications for court." Sarah smiled, realizing how her years of building relationships in the community were creating an unexpected support network. Working late into the night, she created a detailed timeline. Her real estate experience with property documents had taught her that presentation matters. She organized her evidence into a professional portfolio, the dashboard camera footage saved in multiple formats, screenshots of key moments, her GPS data, and a detailed written account of the event. Each piece was labeled and cross-referenced with the precision she usually reserved for complex property transactions. At midnight, her mother called. "Baby, you should get some rest," she said, concern evident in her voice. But Sarah was energized by purpose. "Mom, remember how you always said preparation beats pressure? That's exactly what I'm doing." Her mother's soft chuckle carried years of understanding. "Just like preparing for those open houses. You always did your homework." Sarah took a break to make some tea, her grandmother's favorite chamomile blend. As she waited for the water to boil, she noticed her reflection in the kitchen window, still wearing her pearls from the morning celebration. The contrast between the day's beginning and end struck her, but instead of discouragement, she felt a surge of determination. Returning to her work, she began researching similar cases. Her real estate career had taught her that knowledge of precedents was powerful. She created a spreadsheet tracking local traffic stop statistics, noting patterns that raised questions about enforcement practices. Every cell of data, every saved video file, every documented detail was a brick in the foundation of her defense. As the first hints of dawn began to color the sky, Sarah finally allowed herself to rest. Her evidence was organized with the same attention to detail she brought to her real estate contracts. The portfolio sat ready on her desk, a testament to her professional approach to even the most personal challenges. She hadn't just gathered evidence, she had built a case that would prove impossible to ignore. The municipal courthouse stood like a grand chess piece against the morning sky, its marble steps already warming in the Georgia sun. Sarah arrived an hour early, her evidence portfolio tucked professionally under her arm like she was heading to close another successful real estate deal. Her charcoal gray suit was perfectly pressed, her grandmother's pearls caught the light, and her stride carried the confidence of someone who had spent the night before rehearsing every detail. In the courthouse lobby, Sarah noticed other people waiting for their traffic court sessions, some nervous, others resigned. A young mother struggled to quiet her baby while reviewing crumpled papers. Without hesitation, Sarah walked over and offered her a spare pen and one of her professional notepads. "Sometimes just being organized helps calm the nerves," she said with a warm smile. The woman's grateful response reminded Sarah why she'd built her business on helping others. Courtroom 3B hummed with whispered conversations and shuffling papers. Sarah chose a seat near the front, arranging her materials with the same precision she used during property closings. Her dashboard camera footage was queued up on her tablet, her documentation chronologically organized in her leather portfolio. Each piece of evidence was labeled with color-coded tabs, a system that had served her well in real estate transactions. As the bailiff called the court to order, Sarah observed Judge Harrison's entrance with keen attention. Her years of reading people during property negotiations had sharpened her ability to gauge personalities. The judge's brisk manner and quick glances at the crowded docket suggested efficiency was a priority. Case number 2023 TC 458, Sarah Johnson, the clerk announced. Sarah rose smoothly, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor as she approached the podium. The same poise that had won over skeptical clients now carried her forward, even as she noticed Officer Barrett entering from a side door. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice clear and professional, "I've prepared a comprehensive overview of my case." She gestured to her portfolio, but Judge Harrison's raised hand stopped her mid-motion. "Ms. Johnson, this is a simple traffic violation. Let's keep this brief," the judge stated, already reaching for his gavel. Sarah's real estate training kicked in. She knew how to redirect conversations while maintaining respect. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the evidence I've gathered directly addresses the citations in question." She smoothly opened her portfolio to the first tab, her movements deliberate and assured. The judge's attention shifted slightly as Sarah began presenting her documentation. Her organized approach seemed to give him pause, but when she reached for her tablet to show the dashboard camera footage, his expression hardened. The court is not equipped to review video evidence today, Judge Harrison announced, causing murmurs in the courtroom. Sarah maintained her composure, though her heart raced beneath her calm exterior. What happened next sent ripples through the crowded courtroom. The judge reviewed the citations quickly, barely glancing at Sarah's meticulously prepared evidence. When he announced the fine, $2,500, the amount hung in the air like a heavy storm cloud. Sarah stood perfectly still, her grandmother's voice echoing in her memory. Sometimes your dignity is your most powerful response. She noticed the young mother from the lobby covering her mouth in shock, while Officer Barrett's face remained impassive. Your Honor, Sarah's voice remained steady. I wish to file an immediate notice of appeal. The words came naturally, as if she were negotiating a complex property deal. She had already prepared the appeal paperwork, tab 7 in her portfolio, marked in dark blue. As she walked back to her seat, Sarah's mind was already plotting her next moves like a masterful chess player. The surprising fine wasn't just a number. It was a catalyst for what would become a much larger conversation about justice in their city. The morning after the court hearing, Sarah sat in her real estate office, staring at her phone's screen. Dozens of text messages and missed calls filled her notification bar, but one particular email caught her attention. Lisa Chen, a respected investigative reporter from the Atlanta Daily Times, wanted to discuss her case. Sarah's first instinct was to keep things private, but her business acumen kicked in. She understood the power of a well-told story. Before responding, Sarah did what she did best. She prepared. She transformed her conference room into a media preparation space, pinning key documents to her presentation board like she would for a luxury property showcase. Her dashboard camera footage played silently on the large screen, while copies of her court documents lay neatly arranged on the polished table. Tell me about that morning, Lisa began, her recorder placed carefully between them. Sarah painted the picture of her office opening, the pride in her parents' eyes, the golden scissors cutting the ribbon. Then she described the drive home, her voice steady as she recounted each detail. As she spoke, she noticed Lisa's eyes widening at the mention of the fine amount, $2,500, for a disputed traffic stop. Lisa repeated, scribbling in her notebook. Sarah nodded, sliding across her perfectly organized evidence portfolio, the same one the judge had dismissed. This isn't about the money, Sarah explained, her voice carrying the same warmth she used with first-time homebuyers. It's about ensuring our justice system works fairly for everyone. When I help families find homes, I always tell them to invest in their community. This is me investing in mine. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Sarah's phone began ringing before she'd finished her morning coffee. Local business leaders, many of whom she knew from real estate transactions, called to offer support. Her inbox filled with messages from others who shared similar experiences but had been afraid to speak up. By Wednesday, Sarah's office had become an unexpected hub of activity. A prominent civil rights attorney, James Martinez, arrived unannounced. I read about your case, he said, studying the timeline she created. You've done an impressive job documenting everything. Have you considered the broader implications? Sarah had. Her real estate experience had taught her to see patterns in neighborhoods, to understand how individual properties affected entire communities. This situation was no different. She shared her spreadsheet of local traffic stop data with Martinez, watching his eyebrows rise at the patterns she'd uncovered. Television crews arrived next. Sarah approached each interview with the same professional grace she brought to home closings. She wore her grandmother's pearls, spoke with measured confidence, and always steered the conversation back to the larger issues of fairness and accountability. My grandmother always said, "When you speak your truth, stand tall," Sarah told one reporter, her voice unwavering. The camera caught her in her element, poised, articulate, and determined. The image of her standing before her real estate office, evidence portfolio in hand, became a powerful symbol of dignity in the face of injustice. Social media amplified her story. #StandWithSarah started trending locally, then nationally. But Sarah remained focused, turning down sensational interviews in favor of thoughtful discussions about community relations and systemic change. She used her real estate office's social media platform to share updates, maintaining the same professional tone she used for property listings. By Friday, what had begun as a personal ordeal had transformed into a movement for transparency. Sarah's methodical documentation, professional approach, and unwavering dignity resonated with people across all backgrounds. She wasn't just fighting a fine anymore. She was opening a door for others to share their stories and seek justice. The conference room of Johnson Real Estate Solutions had transformed into what Sarah's father jokingly called Justice Headquarters. Around the large table sat an unlikely alliance: James Martinez, the civil rights attorney, Chief Patricia Rodriguez from the Police Department's Community Relations Division, Dr. Marcus Williams, a respected sociology professor, and several local business leaders Sarah had met through her real estate work. "What strikes me most," Dr. Williams said, gesturing to Sarah's data presentation on the wall screen, "is how thoroughly you've documented everything." The professor had spent the morning reviewing Sarah's spreadsheets of traffic stop patterns, adding his academic expertise to her real-world observations. Sarah stood at the head of the table, her laser pointer moving across charts and graphs with the same confidence she used during property investment presentations. "Each data point represents a real person, a real story," she explained, her voice carrying the perfect balance of compassion and authority that had made her successful in real estate. Chief Rodriguez leaned forward, studying the patterns. "This perspective is invaluable," she admitted. "We've been wanting to build better community relationships, but we needed this kind of detailed feedback." The chief's presence itself was a testament to Sarah's diplomatic approach. She had reached out through proper channels, focusing on collaboration rather than confrontation. The meeting paused as Sarah's assistant brought in fresh coffee and pastries from the local bakery she always recommended to new homeowners. These small touches of hospitality, Sarah knew, could transform tense discussions into productive dialogues. "What if we created a workshop series?" Sarah suggested, pulling up a new presentation slide. "Similar to my first-time homebuyer sessions, but focused on building understanding between law enforcement and community members." Her real estate experience had taught her that education was often the key to breaking down barriers. James Martinez nodded approvingly. "We could include legal rights education, cultural competency training, and open forums for dialogue," he added, scribbling notes. The attorney had been impressed by how Sarah's business acumen translated into community advocacy. As the group brainstormed, Sarah noticed Chief Rodriguez and Dr. Williams engaged in an animated discussion about data-driven policing strategies. Her conference room had become a space where different perspectives could meet productively, just as she had always envisioned when designing her office. "We need to think about sustainability," Sarah interjected, her property developer mindset showing. "Any changes we propose need to have long-term viability." She pulled out one of her real estate planning templates, adapting it for their current purpose. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow through the office windows as the group outlined their action plan. They would start with a pilot program combining community education workshops, data transparency initiatives, and regular dialogue sessions. Sarah's office would host the first series of meetings, a neutral space where all parties could feel comfortable. By day's end, they had created something remarkable: a comprehensive proposal for systematic improvement. Chief Rodriguez would present it to the police commissioner. Dr. Williams would initiate a research study tracking its effectiveness, and James Martinez would ensure legal compliance throughout implementation. As the meeting concluded, Sarah noticed her father standing in the doorway, pride evident in his eyes. "Look at you," he said quietly as the others gathered their materials, "turning real estate into real change." Sarah smiled, adjusting her grandmother's pearls. The skills she developed selling homes, listening, mediating, problem-solving, were now serving a greater purpose. Her office, meant to help families find homes, was becoming a place where her entire community could build a better future together. The sun was setting as Sarah walked her last guest to the door, but the day's work had illuminated a clear path forward. The appeal of her case was still pending, but she had already won something more valuable: the opportunity to create lasting positive change in her beloved city. The appeals courthouse gleamed in the morning light, its imposing architecture a stark contrast to the warmth of the crowd gathered outside. Sarah's real estate clients stood shoulder to shoulder with community leaders, local business owners, and concerned citizens. Her parents, as always, were front and center, her father wearing his lucky tie and her mother clutching a small photo of Sarah's grandmother. Inside the marble halls, Sarah met with James Martinez for final preparations. Her evidence portfolio had grown substantially since the first hearing. Now it included not only her original documentation, but also expert testimonies, statistical analyses from Dr. Williams, and letters of support from various community leaders. "Remember," Martinez said, adjusting his tie, "they've already reviewed most of our written submissions. Today is about bringing it all together." Sarah nodded, touching her grandmother's pearls for reassurance. The same confidence that had helped her close million-dollar property deals now steadied her nerves. The appellate courtroom was larger than she'd imagined, with rich wooden panels and high ceilings that seemed to amplify every whisper. As Sarah took her place beside Martinez, she noticed Chief Rodriguez quietly entering with several other officers. Their presence sent a clear message: this case had implications beyond a simple traffic stop. 3 appellate judges filed in, their robes sweeping behind them. Judge Eleanor Matthews, known for her meticulous attention to detail, sat in the center. Sarah had researched each judge's background as thoroughly as she would a potential business partner. In the matter of Johnson versus the city, Judge Matthews began, her voice clear and measured. "We've reviewed the extensive documentation provided." She paused, looking directly at Sarah. "Ms. Johnson, your preparation in this case is remarkable." For the next hour, the judges asked pointed questions about the traffic stop, the fine, and the broader patterns Sarah had uncovered. Martinez handled the legal arguments masterfully, while Sarah spoke about her personal experience with the same authenticity she brought to her real estate consultations. When she presented the dashboard camera footage, finally being viewed in a courtroom, the entire room fell silent. The video showed exactly what Sarah had maintained all along: a complete stop, professional responses, and no basis for the excessive fine. "Your Honor," Sarah said during her closing statement, standing tall like her father had taught her, "this case is about more than a traffic stop or a fine. It's about ensuring our justice system works fairly for everyone in our community." She gestured to the diverse group of supporters in the gallery. "These people are my neighbors, my clients, my fellow citizens. We're all invested in making our city better." The judges retired to deliberate, leaving the courtroom buzzing with tension. Sarah sat perfectly still, her hands folded over her portfolio, watching the afternoon sun create patterns on the courtroom floor through the high windows. When the judges returned, Judge Matthews' expression was unreadable. "This court has reached a unanimous decision," she announced. The room held its collective breath. "We find that the original fine was not only excessive but indicative of procedural irregularities that require immediate attention." What followed was more than a simple reversal of Sarah's fine. The judges ordered a comprehensive review of the municipal court's fine structure, mandated new training programs for officers and court officials, and established a citizen oversight committee to monitor implementation. As Judge Matthews read the full decision, Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. Her mother reached forward to squeeze her shoulder, while Martinez nodded approvingly. The victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had supported her journey from that first traffic stop to this historic moment. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by jubilant supporters, Sarah heard her father whisper, "Your grandmother would have loved this." Looking up at the clear Atlanta sky, Sarah knew that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. 1 year later, Sarah stood at the podium in the renovated community center, her grandmother's pearls catching the light as she addressed the graduating class of the newly established Civil Rights and Community Leadership Program. The space buzzed with energy as 50 diverse graduates, ranging from law enforcement officers to community activists, waited to receive their certificates. When I opened my real estate office 2 years ago, Sarah began, scanning the familiar faces in the audience. I thought I knew exactly what my contribution to this city would be, helping families find homes. She smiled, remembering that sunny morning with the golden scissors. Life had bigger plans. The program she now directed was housed in a building she'd helped acquire through her real estate connections, a former warehouse transformed into a state-of-the-art training facility. The walls displayed photographs documenting the journey. The courthouse steps filled with supporters, the first community dialogue session in her office, Chief Rodriguez and Dr. Williams leading a joint training session. Today, we're not just celebrating your graduation, Sarah continued, gesturing to the graduates. We're celebrating what happens when a community decides to turn challenges into opportunities for growth. Among the graduates sat Officer Barrett's partner, whose presence symbolized the changing attitudes within the department. The scholarship fund Sarah had established, initially seeded with her returned fine money and matched by local businesses, had already helped 10 aspiring law students from underserved communities begin their legal education. 2 of them were interning with James Martinez, who now ran regular legal clinics in Sarah's office building. Dr. Williams's research team had documented significant improvements in community police relations over the past year. Traffic stop data, now publicly accessible through a transparency portal Sarah helped design, showed more equitable enforcement patterns. The Citizen Oversight Committee, on which Sarah served as vice chair, had become a model for other cities. But perhaps most meaningful to Sarah was the mentorship program she'd created, pairing experienced professionals with young entrepreneurs. Success shouldn't be a surprise, she often told her mentees, thinking back to that traffic stop. It should be an expectation we help each other achieve. After the ceremony, as graduates took photos with their families, Sarah walked through the building's hallways. Each classroom was named after someone who contributed to the journey. The Rodriguez Room for Community Dialogues, the Martinez Suite for Legal Education, the Williams Hall for Research and Data Analysis. Her phone buzzed. A message from the young mother she'd met in the courthouse that day. She had just passed her real estate exam and wanted to join Sarah's growing firm. These were the moments that made everything worthwhile. Outside, the setting sun painted the Atlanta skyline in familiar orange and pink hues. Sarah's parents waited by their car, ready to take her to dinner at the same restaurant where they'd celebrated her office opening. Her father carried a small plaque, another award for her growing collection, though she kept most of them in a box, preferring to display community photos in her office. As they drove through the city, Sarah noticed small changes that represented larger victories. New community outreach centers, updated traffic signage, police officers chatting casually with residents. Her own real estate business had thrived, but she'd discovered a deeper purpose, building not just homes, but bridges. "You know what your grandmother used to say," her mother remarked as they pulled up to the restaurant. "When you light a candle for others, it also brightens your own path." Sarah touched her pearls and smiled. What had begun as one woman's stand for justice had evolved into a movement for positive change, proving that sometimes the most important foundations we build aren't made of brick and mortar, but of hope, determination, and unwavering dignity.